Hello, everyone, and welcome to 180 Degrees of Impact. I'm Matt Scott, and I am here with Tayo Rockson. How are you doing, Tayo?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Matt?
Good, good. It's good to talk with you and good to have you as part of this. I know when we were talking a little bit earlier, you described yourself as just a random guy from Twitter, but I know you're a lot more than that, and you have a lot that you bring to the table. Uh, how in the world do you sum it all up and describe yourself to people?
Thanks for that, by the way. And yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it was your great work that led me to find you on Twitter. And I remember, I think I responded to something, or I just acknowledged something you'd done, and I thought it was really cool. But, but the way I describe myself, I'm pretty much a walking contradiction. Essentially, a lot of the way I appear is not how I am. I grew up in 5 countries and 4 continents, so out of that, I was always the minority everywhere that I went, and so I describe myself as a cultural translator and a brand strategist. A lot of what I do as a culture translator is help companies and individuals figure out how to create inclusive environments and leverage the diversity that they have. And what I do as a brand strategist is to help change makers really stand out and define their stories and their messages so that they can solve today's problems. And the connecting thread between those two things is that it's really about leveraging the differences that we have within us and empowering people, individuals, to be able to make a dent in today's world. So, yeah, that's a short version of who I am, but for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and I know that there's already so much out there about with you speaking about who you are and
Mhm.
what you do, and we'll get into that at the end. I promise that I will get to getting all of your links and all of your plugs in, so we'll do that. But I'd love to know, where does that passion come from? Like, where did you initially develop that passion for cultural competency and understanding how to leverage your diversity?
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day, and I was trying to figure out the genesis of this point. I mean, if you grew up the son of a diplomat, inevitably your life is one where you have to figure out how to connect across cultures if you want to, you know, fit in school. Basically, I remember when I was 10 years old, I was this skinny kid with a Nigerian accent in a French-speaking country and in an American international school, going through puberty. All those degrees of changes. You sort of have to find a way to connect. But I also think that the fact that I grew up like that, in addition to spending the first 9 years of my life in a military dictatorship in Nigeria, where I saw a lot of civil liberties being taken away, and just that juxtaposition of dictatorship with then exposure, sort of, it really tapped into something innate in me, and I was just curious about why some people have opportunity and why some people don't. And I felt fortunate to have been exposed to different types of opportunities, and I don't know, for some reason it never left me. When I was 10 years old, I always said I was going to do something to sort of bring people together, and just being able to grow up from that radical change to that exposure, I felt like I wanted to do the same thing, and it also came with my two biggest influences, the late Nelson Mandela, who died, rest in peace, and Oprah Winfrey. And for me, with the late Nelson Mandela, I was the kid, who would watch Mandela be the first black president of South Africa in 1994, and I was about 5 years old, 6 years old, and I remember reading about him and wondering, wow, this guy broke out of a very hostile environment. We're still in a dictatorship. Maybe there's hope for us. And he was just such a symbol for me, and I study his life a lot. And with Oprah Winfrey, I love the media element and her live your best life mantra, and how she used her platforms through media to tell that story. So, growing up with those two sort of just made me feel like I could do the same thing. And I wanted to do that for the African continent and the world after that.
That is insanely powerful to hear about and to understand. And I'm with you in Nelson Mandela and Oprah Winfrey being two of my big influences. And I'd really love to know also, just considering you're talking about what motivates you.
Mm.
In terms of our world today, in terms of your day to day, what drives you, what motivates you to continue to do the work that you're doing?
That actually is pretty easy, because I just know that there's a lot of work. We have a situation where we have an interesting president in the United States. We have Brexit. We have several incidents happening in the Middle East, things happening in my country, Nigeria, with Boko Haram. And just that enough for me is enough to allow me to realize that there's much more work to be done. A lot of my platforms are for equality, and that's gender equality, that's religious equality, that's all these type of things where people get the opportunity to express themselves as they are. And the fact that every day you hear about someone being killed because of who they are, being ostracized because of who they are, or not afforded an opportunity because of who they are, that just informs me that there's a lot of work. And it's not just turning the news, it's just going around the street and listening to my friends and them saying, I got stopped by this cop, or I didn't get this scholarship opportunity because of my parents' background. And that motivates me every day. I mean, I hate to say it's an easy way to get motivated, but it reminds me on a daily basis that I have a lot of work to do. And what I want to do is to inspire change makers to end up solving a lot of the problems, because we can't all do it alone. We have to do it as a community. So, yeah, it's just that reality that there is much to do that inspires me all the time.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point that I could definitely relate to, because I mean, I look at the world in multiple ways. Like, I look at it in terms of what I do and my occupation and how I spend my time, but then also identity. Like, as a young Black man, that impacts how I interact with the world and how the world interacts with me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And what you were saying resonated with me, because it brought up this other, like, this dichotomy. In one sense, there's a lot of motivation. There's a lot that really easily motivates you, but then there's also a lot of challenge there, and a lot of, like, adversity. Like, what's some of that adversity that you have found yourself facing, or that you find yourself facing? Because I'm sure it's not easy to all of it.
No, that's a fair question. And whenever I think about that, I'm often reminded of a quote by Maya Angelou, and she says, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And that is what gets me through any adversity that I come across. I mean, in my entrepreneurship journey, me deciding that I was going to be an entrepreneur who was going to be a change maker, it was not a popular decision with my family. We're all Nigerians. In Nigeria, you're supposed to be a lawyer, engineer, or doctor. Anything else is too risky, and you're wasting your money. They spent all this money to get you to America. What are you doing here? But I just couldn't feel, and on this journey, I've been fired twice. I've been broke multiple times. But then the consistency of sort of telling my story led me to really push through all those difficult times, where I remember one of those times when I was really, really, really down on the money and opportunity. I got a call from the World Bank saying, we want you to come speak to a bunch of kids who grew up the same way you did. And that happened with Entrepreneur, recognized in the podcast as a top podcast in 2014. And every time I was always down, something like that would always happen. And I'm talking about near eviction, talking about not being able to pay school. And just because I was reminded of those things, fired twice, near-death experience, almost got evicted. And every single time something happened, I started to learn how to really have confidence in my story. And it led to several more opportunities. And I mean, and it just reminded me of Maya Angelou, because I was like, Maya Angelou's quote is really about the big picture. Come as one, you stand 10,000. And I keep reminding myself, if I don't speak now, not many people will be able to get to hear voices. What about those voiceless, and what about people that don't have that? And I mean, it sounds very, idealistic, which I tend to be, but it honestly is, it's that simple. Too many people get comfortable with the status quo. They don't like to be uncomfortable, because it means they're going to have to ruffle. It means they're going to have to ruffle their feathers. They're going to have to, oh my goodness, it's always been this way. Why do I have to change the system? Am I going to lose an opportunity? But I find comfort in being uncomfortable. And honestly, while the road was rocky, it's led to a lot of my best opportunities. And now I'm at a place where I can say I would not be here if I had given up on any of those difficult moments.
Yeah, and I alluded to, like, at the very beginning, a lot of those, a lot that you have out there. Like if someone does a Google search for your name, they will find a lot of
Yeah.
talks. They'll find
Yeah.
so many podcast episodes and so on and so forth. In addition to just seeing what you're putting out there on a day-to-day basis when it comes to all of the media, what are some of those opportunities that you've had that did that thing that you're talking about? You mentioned the World Bank, for instance, but what were
Yeah.
some of those other opportunities where you really felt like you were living a dream?
The opportunities. Wow. So this year, after trying out for 2 years to get into TEDx, I got the opportunity to speak at 3 TEDx talks. And that to me was a surreal moment because I remember vividly those moments when I was questioning myself, and my parents were questioning me too. And they're very supportive, but they're always very nervous because this is not something that anyone normally does in Nigeria. What are you doing? Where's the opportunity coming from? And after about 18 applications, 16 to 18, I just, TEDx they kept saying no, no one responded, and then all of a sudden, one said yes. We need someone to talk about bringing people together. Another said yes after the 2 weeks after, and then the third one actually found me without me applying, and it was a very pinch myself moment because this was a goal I had given myself until 30. I said I was going to be a TEDx speaker by the time I was 30. And here I was at 27, not having just one talk, but 3 talks. And I think that's one opportunity. World Bank is definitely another one. Being recognized as the #2 podcast of 2017 on CIO.com and Entrepreneur. Yeah, I mean, it's just very humbling when you get these things, but a lot of times these opportunities, while they are free and they're good for your brand, it's a reminder that timing matters, consistency matters, and people are listening and they're looking for inspiration. So yeah, I mean, those are the moments that have been really, really surreal for me. If I were to put those into bullet points.
Yeah, that's it. I find that so powerful for many reasons, but in particular because one thing that I've heard from so many people who are pursuing a passion or a career or going out on their own and doing anything
Mm-hmm.
is that oftentimes like they will put out the 16 different applications or they will like put out hundreds of tweets, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and they don't hear anything until that 100th tweet or that 16th application.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit intimidating, just knowing that oftentimes you're not going to see the results overnight, but when you stick to those things, that's when you will truly see results.
Yeah, that's how you weed out the tough ones.
Yeah.
I applied to over 85 jobs before I even got one job after college. And my thing is, it's not because I'm not a citizen, so I have the second ladder. I have to get a company to sponsor my visa.
Mhm.
So there were like many obstacles to that. But I had to keep applying because I knew that there was something that was going to give if I kept going with that. So yeah, consistency and persistency for sure.
Yeah, and I think speaking of consistency, another piece of I'll say your brand that I see a lot of is that there is a very consistent brand. So there is a lot that you're doing, and yet it's a cohesive message. How
Yeah.
did you manage to discover what your brand was and what your message should be? I think that's a really important lesson for change makers to figure out because a lot of people are brilliant and passionate and want to help the world, but they don't necessarily know how. So how did you figure that out?
Well, the first thing is you have to have a high level of self-awareness and really know what your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you don't know that, ask your friends, your families, and your old colleagues what it is that they think you do best, what type of jobs they think you can do, and sort of find the common thread within that. The second thing you have to do is to start to tell your story. We live in such a digital time that you can do that in multiple ways. You're doing that right now with this platform. You can do that with your blog. You can do that with video. You can do that with audio, Snapchat, or Facebook, Instagram. And then once you start to tell your story, build a community around the things that resonate around that. Once you build a community around that, go above and beyond for that community. It could be 5 people. It could be 10 people. It doesn't have to be 1,000. but go above and beyond for that, so much so that they become evangelists of your work because you have really just hit on everything that you said you were going to do, and you've over delivered. And as you start to do that, start to leverage those opportunities in those that community into more opportunities. Now you have a bunch of followers, or 5, 10 people that can vouch for you. Those becoming testimonials. You can then leverage those testimonials into bigger opportunities to say, "Hey, I've done such and such for X, Y, Z. Listen to what they said. I would love to do the same for your company. I would love to do the same for your organization." And while you're there, just understand that you have to keep doing it every day, or every week, because not everyone will bite. But and then once you get there, make sure that you're also surrounding yourself with people that build you up, people that celebrate other people's successes, people that are happy for you, but they challenge you as well. And you need to rid yourself of people that drain you, that are negative, and they're unmotivated. And then yeah, I mean, I think those are the steps that you can get to do that. And also, don't be frustrated if you don't know what it is first. When I first started writing, it was I want to say I was writing about sports, I was writing about entrepreneurship, I was just writing about anything I was passionate about. There was no clear focus. And then eventually I went to an event by Erin Huffton, and for some reason, something that she had said reminded me of an article I'd read before about third culture kids. And third culture kids are people that spent the formative periods of their lives outside of their parents' cultures. Um, they're basically like diplomatic kids, missionary kids, and people that always travel in between cultures. And I was like, I've been trying all this while to figure out what it is that I'm good at. And I was like, I'm good at being myself. I have over 20 years of traveling all over this places. What if I turn that into something that I can tell the world? What have I learned from that? And then the podcast came out of that. And then out of that podcast, I started writing more about my perspective on the world. And then some people said, "Hey, I like that. Maybe we should share that." But that was 2 years into my writing journey. I was writing about sports and other things, and then a haha moment clicked. And that's because I was just staying consistent writing or putting out content. So I just want to remind people that don't be frustrated if you don't have that clear focus yet, but still do the work. It'll come.
And right now, as of now, who are your biggest supporters?
Wow, biggest supporters, man. I wow, family is always there. I mean, mom and dad always checking in for sure every day, asking. Dad just asked me how my clients were. He just sent me a WhatsApp message. And my mom's always been the day one. But there are many podcast listeners. They're the ones. A lot of the podcast listeners will email me and say, "Hey, I really like that episode. Thank you for doing that. That really helped me get through that." And one thing that I do every time I go speak or consult or anything, I leave my card. I always tell them, please email me. Let me know anything if you have any questions, and I'm very responsive with that. So I think podcast listeners will rank first, and then people that read my blog posts second, and then third would be people that whenever I go to events, sometimes I have one or two people who really stay behind to really share the message, and I always stay and keep in touch with them and do like weekly check-ins for them. So yeah,
I think it's good for people to see. It's good for me to see. Your parents are so vital. Your family is so vital. Your best friends are so vital, or
yeah,
or even people who just randomly seem to take to whatever content you're putting out there on the internet. Like those people are important to you building something. One thing I see all the time in my work is how important community is. So that definitely resonates with me.
yeah, yeah. I have a Facebook group called "Use Your Difference to Make a Difference," and I always put we have several conversations there, and it's all about community and inspiring others to do the same. But I will make this point: sometimes family are not your biggest supporters. So yeah, it comes a point in every change maker's journey, every entrepreneurship journey, where you know cutting people or cutting things has to be part of your way to grow. Because I read this somewhere: distracting opportunities have to die in order for your most important goals to live. And if you're not brave enough to make those cuts, it's ultimately going to harm you. So you have to be very aware about anchors in your life.
Yeah, you have to definitely some people say trim the fat. You have to
Yeah,
trim the fat.
that's a good one for sure.
What was it that ultimately motivated you to take that first big step? Because um, you could have just as easily right now been working for, let's say, a Fortune 500 corporation or a big government organization, doing what you do, making waves in the way that you do. Um, but you're not doing that. You're doing your own thing. What was the one thing that really pushed you to take that first big step, or that huge leap?
The leap for in my career.
Yeah, the leap in your career.
Um, well, this story. I shared a story off. So I had taken that job that I said I took after 85 job rejections. It was very much out of desperation. You know, I wanted to stay in the country, and I needed a company to sponsor my visa. And they offered to do it. I thought I was going to do social media. Ended up being sales. So they said, "Hey, you got $10,000 to make. Here's your quota, ma'am. Drop it on there." I've never done sales before, and then and there, I felt like I had to give up on my dream. Right? I felt like, man, I tried over 85 times, no one said yes. I mean, I guess it's done. And that 10-year-old kid who wanted to change the world all of a sudden was suppressed for a little bit. So 2 years of that went on, and it was just not a good time. I just was going through the motions. And then a few things happened. I mean, one, I just randomly woke up in cold sweats, no reason. And the only thought that came to my mind at that point was, I can't believe this is going to be the next 60 years of your life, right? Wow, you said you were meant for bigger things, and this is what you're doing. And I went back to sleep. And then the second thing was I went to New York City. I'd always been fascinated with New York. It's the backdrop of many of my favorite movies, and it's just New York City. And I had media aspirations, so New York. I went there to see my mentor and also catch a basketball game. Huge basketball fan, and I just felt alive. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is an interesting feeling. I haven't felt this alive in a while. Like I just feel like there's a possibility here. I don't know what the dream would be, but I wasn't quite brave enough to do anything about it. So I went back." But a seed was planted. I was like, okay, if I was to move anywhere, it would be here. And a couple months after that, I was driving to New York City. No, I was driving to work rather in Virginia, and my lane cuts into half. This car swerves into my lane, so I'm swerving out of the way so that I, get out of the way and find a way to just be safe. But in that process, I smash into the left guardrail, and then right one, and then I hit one car, then two cars, and then back to the left guardrail. The car lifts up, and it's about to flip over the bridge. I'm 22 years old, and I'm saying to myself, the only thought that comes to my mind at the time is, have you done everything you said you were going to do in life? And I hadn't. So I slammed the brakes and somehow managed to get out of the car unscathed. In the middle of the road, my car completely totaled, 3-car accident. And I just took that sign of me being alive in that very near death experience as a sign for me to really, really just move. And so shortly after that, I quit my job and moved to New York City with nothing but a dream, hope, and ambition. And the journey began. For me, I started. I got into an MBA program for them, and I'll go to the school, but New York City became my campus. And I just really started doing everything I said I was going to do. I launched a podcast, and the podcast for me was very much an experiment. I wanted to understand why we live in a global and digital world, but not many people act global and digital. So that's what I was doing. Didn't know that it would become the ultimate impetus for my career, but I just committed to action, and I did everything that I thought of. Move to New York City, go. Don't have money, figure it out. Launch a podcast, do it. Go to every meeting that you can. And that's, in that process, I sort of discovered myself and really became confident with that. But yeah, the near death experience was sort of the impetus to the whole thing.
That's really interesting for me to hear, because I've spoken with a lot of change makers, a lot of people who are looking to impact the world in some way or the other. However they choose to label themselves as change makers, innovators, whatever it might be. And there is actually a common thread that I see between a lot of people that has to do with death, like near-death experience, or they lost someone close to them, and so they began to value the limited time that they already had. And I just want to stress that, because I'm noticing that pattern, and it's something. It's definitely
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I really hope people don't have to go through near that
No,
experiences. But
no,
I think what should be taken from that is the fact that life is, tomorrow's not promised, right? So you can only do so much with the time you have, and thinking that there's always tomorrow is it's not a good way to think. You have an idea, act on it. Don't be afraid to fail. Just commit to action. Too many people, they say the graveyard is the richest place in the world because of all the unfulfilled ideas and unfulfilled inventions and all the things that went with people. When people are on their deathbeds, one of the most common things people say is that I regret, I regret, I regret, I regret. I wish I did that. I wish I did that. So just thinking about that is a good way to make sure that you don't end up, uh, like I had to. So there you go.
yeah. And that's one big reason why I think it's so important to share these stories and to allow people to hear from you and learn from you, because again, like, not everyone needs the near death experience to
Yeah.
be motivated to take action in the world. What are some of those stories of people who you've interacted with? Um, I know this might be uh, tough for you to say about yourself, but what are some of those stories of people who have been already impacted by your message? Does anything immediately come to mind?
So my favorite thing by far um, is always when I hear from a listener or subscriber, and they send me essays. I get this occasionally where they talk about their journey to their self through a podcast episode or something that I've written. I remember there was a story. I was going to speak earlier this year, and it was at a middle school conference. And me and my business partner Sandra were with us. We're going there to speak about diversity, and it was 50 middle schools. I think about 250 students, and it was in Massachusetts. We had gotten invited to speak there, and we were keynoting. And right before we got there, one of the students, she was, I believe, she was 12 or 13, and one of the most articulate people I'd ever come across. And she basically talked to me about her experience being a Latina in the time. It was right around the time the new president got elected, 45. Right around the time 45 got elected, and she was just telling me how it was. She was experiencing this interesting dichotomy within her where she's Latina but she doesn't look Latina, and she feels like she has to suppress that part of her, but she wants to be able to express it more. That she didn't have people in heroes that she could relate to in her textbooks. She didn't have she almost felt a sense of hopelessness, but because she read a blog post that I written, she felt more inspired to continue to tell a story. And she had participated in the Women's March. She was saddened by the police shootings. And I just felt like, wow, like this is a 12, 13-year-old who's thinking like this. And we take for granted how many people are watching us. And so those type of stories where people always tell me, I've had a series of those where they tell me that they're inspired to take action because of a particular point that they got from someone's interview that I did, or a podcast, or a blog post that I wrote. Those to me that's the reason why I even do this, right? But it also is motivating to me because they're saying they're committing to action. So that's my favorite thing with that.
I think it's so interesting. You mentioned being only 27 now, and I think a lot of people would just be so amazed at all that you have accomplished in that time. Which leads me to one of my favorite questions, and I'll say one of my last questions. Unfortunately, if your life story were a book or documentary, what would that title be, and why?
Um, wow. Ty Rockson, one man's path to using his difference to make a difference. So my mission statement is use your difference to make a difference. And the reason why I said I would title it that is because I've always been aware of the fact that we are all innately special. I feel like society is programmed us to think that there are only different types of success that one can adhere to and aspire to. And a lot of my mission has been to get people to express their individuality and to get people to really tap into the diversity that we have in the world and leverage and celebrate that. So the reason why that would be my documentary is because it's been my lifelong quest to really celebrate all that's different around us, while also emphasizing our differences, whether you're quirky, whether you're funny, whatever it is. And I believe that the more we do that, the more self-confident we'll be, but also the more we'll be able to help others. Too many people are looking for heroes that we don't know are. And that story I shared with you about the 12-year-old lady, that was a reminder to me. I was like, I didn't even know that 12-year-old people were reading my blog post. I thought it was, a little older. And so that would be my title for sure, because I want to be able to do that in every part of the world.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much impact that you're having and so much that you're doing. Is there anything else, that any other message you just want to put out into the world, or anything that you want people to know?
What do I think? A few quotes come to mind. There's one by Confucius. It says, "He who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right." I like to make that more gender neutral, and he or she.
Yeah.
Who says she can't are both usually right. But there's another one by Oprah, and it's she goes like, I'm going to butcher this, but I've come to believe that each one of us has a personal calling as unique as a fingerprint, and that for us to actually achieve that, we have to be able to step into that light and really, really commit to hard work and allow the universe to direct us. And it's basically being aware that we have gifts, committed to service, and then just being ruthless with our hard work and consistency, because it will pay off. I think that many people now are looking for inspiration, and I think we have more skills, more tools available to us to be able to tell our messages. So yeah, tell your message, tell your story, no matter how insignificant you think it is. Start to build a community, 1 to 2 people. If that's what you can, do that now. It will grow if you provide the right type of value, and don't ever give up.
And I think that's totally powerful, and that's one thing I find so inspiring, and that's what's at the heart of 180 Degrees of Impact, because what I'm trying to do is to recognize that everyone brings something unique to the table.
Exactly.
And so there are a lot of similarities between people, but in order to accomplish something great and make great change in the world, we need to come together, work together, and celebrate each other instead of competing and butting heads. So I know you have tons of lessons. I'm sure you could be here for hours and hours and hours on end sharing those lessons. So where could people find you on the internet, and what should people check out when it comes to you and your work if they want to learn more?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate that. Rockson.com. So TAYOROCKSON.com. That's usually the easiest way to find me. My podcast is called "As Told by Nomads." My company is UID Management, but if you go to TyRockson.com, you'll be able to have access to all that. And I'm working on a few projects coming out soon, and please, be subscribe to the blog, and I'll be letting you know what's going on. But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know I'm glad that you have it all linked through your website, because there is a lot to check out there. For anyone who wants to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, please check out www.letscare or let's.care, and check it out on social media at Let's You Care on Twitter, or facebook.com/letsyoucare, and you could find me somewhere there, Matt Scott GW, on all of the social media platforms. Tayo, thank you again for joining in, and for everyone else who is just watching and tuning in. Until next time, please keep impacting.